excited to do this. We're going to be talking about the toy panel. We have with us two different folks that are involved in the designer toy world. I was informed that maybe calling them designer toys downplays the whole thing, but I like the idea of it being toy. Go ahead and just do me a favor, grab your microphone and just keep it in your hand the whole time. Sorry, I should have mentioned that earlier. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about this whole kind of industry that is wrapped around Las Vegas for this weekend, kind of the origins of where it started and some of the speculations about where it might be going. First, I want to give a shout out to Dove Kelmer, who's on the stage with me, who goes back to the origins of this with DKE. DKE is not only a toy company that produces toys with several different artists, fantastic booth full of all kinds of witty plays on pop culture. Back in the beginning of this, I met Dove because he was involved in doing distribution, where the bigger companies like Kid Robot, they kind of had all that figured out. But for the little guy, the small company of a few employees or just an artist that was kind of trying to build their own vision, you were an instrumental part in helping that early distribution network of going out to stores. So, Dove, when we go back to the beginning of it, how did you realize that there was a need for distribution for all of this?
I think it just started out based on my interest.
Yeah.
My mom always had a joke. She said, you turn all your hobbies into businesses. What do you do for fun? Right? So I was heavily involved. DKE Toys started out doing very traditional Star Wars toys, science fiction collectibles. And about 2004, 2005, the vinyl toy market just started. I started seeing, I guess I was getting burnt out with the normal mainstream collectibles.
Right.
It was just very evident that a licensee was going to continue to milk that license to meet their minimum, and they will just keep making stuff and making stuff. And I would, I guess, keep buying it until I, was saturated. And then I started to see it happen from company licensee to licensee, and then I started to see my room just getting filled with all this stuff. And then once the designer toy came on the market, and I realized there was an artist personality imbued in this piece of plastic, it had more meaning to me than just because I know who made it.
Right.
So I had Frank Kozik posters on my wall in college, and I saw Frank Kozik toy. So the Bounty Hunter toy and his bear brick, and I was like, I want that. And that just seemed to resonate more than another Chewbacca.
Right.
And then the silver Chewbacca.
Right.
But we're going to reuse the mold and make the gold one. Now we're going to change the scale and start over again. It's like, no. So basically, I knew a bunch of people who were starting out, and I already was dabbling in liquidations and dealing with business to business, and I always preferred selling wholesale. If I went to a show and I had a trunk full of stuff, I would always be selling to the dealers, not the people at the show.
Right.
I had no idea that I would be in my 50s and be on the show circuit.
Doing straight to customer.
That was not what I had envisioned for my life. But my life has gone this crazy roller coaster. So
yeah.
So there was just a need, and I was just around a lot of people who said, "Hey, can you sell this stuff for me?" And it always goes back to Frank Kozik for me because a lot of artists would get paid in toys.
Yeah.
They would send their toys to me, and then I would pay them. And then people would call Kozik and say, "Hey, what's up with this Dove guy?" And he would just say, "Dove's cool, he pays." And I didn't go to, I don't have a degree in business administration. I just started a business just sort of doing what I said I was going to do. I returned phone calls and I paid my bills.
Yeah.
And apparently that makes you like a superstar.
Yeah.
So ridiculous. So, and then it just started. Once I had the stuff and everybody knew, then everyone kept calling. And then everyone else said, well, can you sell my stuff too? And then eventually I had a 10,000 square foot warehouse and staff, and that just sort of grew, from my living room.
Right.
Until I took the business to where I couldn't take it any farther.
Right.
I wasn't going to invest to upscale. It wasn't a scalable business for me and what I was doing. And so we wanted to have a second kid, and I was working 80 hours a week, and it was time to sell.
Nice.
And in 2016, we sold to Dispersed. And they basically took my model and has taken it to the next level. And we'll talk about the history of that later.
Your model of checking your email, calling people back, and paying bills.
They're still doing that.
Nice.
It's pretty good.
Nice.
I call every once in a while and say, hey, what's going on? It's pretty good.
What I love about this, though, is that they say one of the best reasons to start a business is to identify a hole in the market and to patch it. And you realize that a lot of these artists are making this, you're a collector first and foremost, so you're working in a genre that you love. And so you're seeing these products, and you can easily understand that they're getting paid in toys, but their job isn't distribution. They're trying to figure out how to take this asset they get and push it further down the road. And when we look at trends, there's all these artists that are maybe they only ever made one toy, or maybe they made 20. Or Frank's case, he made hundreds of toys. But there often needs to be something a little bit more mainstream that is an entry point that grows a subculture so people can dig deeper. And that's where kind of, I think, Kid Robot comes into the story. And, Paul Abundance being a visionary, and he saw the toy as an opportunity to go much further than that. And then, Kid Robot would sort of change along the way. And I was bummed out as a fan of Kid Robot because as much as I love the independent stuff that was being made, touched by the hand of the artist, I liked where Paul was going with more of the pop culture approach of it. So like a lot of fans, I was sort of disheartened when he stopped that because I felt like there was a lot more of that story to be told. And then I realized that Paul and good mutual friend of ours, Huck G, was starting SUPERPLASTIC, which is where Jennifer comes into the story because Jennifer is the CEO of SUPERPLASTIC. And so what I think is interesting about SUPERPLASTIC is hopefully we're going to get to see Paul. I don't know if he ever finishes the story because it feels like he's always writing it, but I do love that SUPERPLASTIC felt like that level of sort of, I feel like there needs to be a certain amount of mainstream to bring people into a subculture. And I felt like he was around to try to do that again. And Jennifer, you guys have a crazy business model that I don't even think you all really know where it's going yet, where we're looking at different ways to use AR, AI, VR, like all these different technologies. You're trying to figure out that's fun, but how do we make it consumable? And I think we're limited by our imaginations on what's possible. So as you stepped in as CEO, what were some of your initiatives with this company, SUPERPLASTIC?
Yeah, great question, and totally true, right? We are trying to still figure out the business model at scale.
Right.
And the key for us is really that this business, as Paul always told me when he and I were interviewing and getting to know each other, that he always wanted the IP side of the business, the characters, to be much, much bigger and more than just the toy piece.
Right.
And he really started that initiative, right, with the short form content on TikTok, the massive integration into Fortnite, I guess conveniently during the pandemic because it rocketed the popularity of the characters, which started to give us a whole new world of a business model now.
Right.
Because you have an insane top of the funnel to come through. I mean, we have 22 million followers on social media. 21.5 million of those have never bought a toy.
Right.
And so that was kind of step one. So when I took over in the company, September of 2023, it was sort of, hey, we've got all these followers, we make great toys, we have a really great collector base and a fan base, but what's the business model? And
right.
Paul had done a brilliant job raising a lot of money from investors like Google and Amazon and Kering and a whole bunch of incredible, organizations that were there willing to help. And that really has been my task for the last 15 months. The most exciting things that we're doing now, and we're still seeing this as testing and learning and growing, are really how do we take these characters that people know and love and actually now take you with them on adventures and take you on adventures with them. And so a big piece of that is slightly longer format content, but the biggest piece is what we're opening this week in here in Las Vegas at Area 15, which is our new immersive experiential location. Dopamine Institute for Pleasure Research.
Yeah, which I got to experience on Friday morning, which was really great to go through there and go into that world. And Dove, it's an interesting moment where like your entry point to toys was IP, right? You watched Star Wars, it opened up your imagination, you started buying the toys and collecting them. It's interesting now that this world is trying to create its own IP, right? It's just one of those like circles of life moments.
I mean, that's what business does, right?
Yep.
Everyone wants to own IP. Every creator that is borrowing from IP and the limited edition handmade pieces that they're making, ultimately, in the back of their mind, wants their own IP. Because who doesn't want passive income?
Right.
Who doesn't want to sit on the couch and get paid, right? So, and because all of those characters and archetypes, we've all grown up with them and they're part of our culture. So everyone looks at the creators who made all those characters, you know, Walt Disney, Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, all those people throughout history, George Lucas, like those are some of the most, you know, revered people in our culture.
Yeah.
Is always like the storyteller who then creates these characters that, you know, live rent-free in our minds all the time.
When you were working with artists that were trying to distribute their own art in a new platform, what was sort of your happy point in there? You know, like, because you're a consumer, you're a collector, you're friends with all these guys. Like, were you able to capture a little bit of an excitement when the sales came through? I mean, obviously you had your own monetary interest in mind, but you know these people. Were you rooting for them? Like, man, this is a good guy. I really hope that this platform or this character takes off.
Of course. I mean, I think the first toy that really resonated with me was Todd Shore's Bunny Duck.
Okay.
And I love Todd Shore's painting. And then this toy came out with this. If you Google it, it's crazy. It's a take on Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny, and you know, with a fez and what. But it's this feat of, you know, engineering in vinyl that they're holding these big pumpkins. It's a crazy piece, and it is a 3D representation of this piece of art that he created. And so now, instead of collecting a 2D print, I mean, assuming that the $50,000 painting is out of the question,
Yeah.
you know, and the $1,000 you know, print is not available to you, you have this toy that, I forget the retail, let's say it was $125 or $100. And my wife and I were like, we sold 700 of them out of our kitchen in 2 days.
Wow.
We're like, this is a business for us.
Yeah, yeah.
So you don't, when you're an independent distributor and you're providing a service for creators, you don't like everything that walks in the door.
Sure.
It doesn't all resonate. It can't. But it's a service, and as long as it was appropriate for the market, we would carry it. And this market, if you look at just what's in this room, all the different types of art, you know, you have like cute Asian stuff, you have street and graffiti art, you have, you know, lowbrow and pop surrealist, you have, you know, poster artists, you have, you know, and it's even, then there's fringes of each of those.
Sure.
So I think the things that excited me the most were the three-dimensional pieces that represented, you know, a pre-existing piece of art, as opposed to, let's say, the platform toy. But then those had a charm among, you know, in and of themselves. So, and then you would see, when I first started, vinyl was it. And if you sold anything that was not in vinyl, the stores would have nothing to do with you.
Right.
Resin was out of the question. And then that just, as people made cooler and cooler stuff, then you started seeing porcelain items and wood and resin, and now it just doesn't matter. Now it's like the art is the art, and that's all people care about.
What I love about that, though, is the toy simplifies art, and it makes it, it's a consumable good that people can quickly understand, you know? And the reason why I say that the kid robots were so important to the ecosystem is, look at the blind box chase. You know, people go into a store, it's under $20, and they don't understand this, but they're participating in environmental art, in design. There's a little bit of gambling involved, which is fun as an adult. When you have so much grown-up money you have to spend, it's fun to take a chance. But really, what people are doing is they're finding an entry point into art. And there are those of us that it's been our life and our identity and everything we've pursued. But there's a lot of people where it's like, it's just not for me. And they don't realize how much art actually does affect all these decisions they've made throughout their life and how they spend their entertainment and their consumer dollars. But there's these different entry points. So I love the idea of you saying the $50,000 paintings out, the $1,000 items out, but maybe the $125 item is right.
Right. But you know what, Frank Kozik, even before he worked for Kid Robot at San Diego, he would just sort of do an informal poll and just ask all these people who came up to his booth, how did you get started?
Yeah.
And 9 times out of the 10, it was a dunny.
Yeah.
So the dunny was the thing that did outreach to just this whole group of collectors, and then before you know it, it's sort of, you know, it's just a gateway drug. I mean,
Yeah,
really,
totally.
At the end of the day.
Jennifer, it's interesting for you all with SUPERPLASTIC. Speaking of the gateway drug, like the big distribution model for Kid Robot for a while at its peak was like Urban Outfitters. Yeah. Going into a place where people are doing one kind of shopping, fooling them into doing some other kind of shopping, and maybe they get hooked. Oh shit, I didn't get the one I want. Let me buy another one. I mean, I owned a toy store for a while. I saw it take off right in front of me, you know? Like, some people just can't stop. And they're falling in love with the chase and all the art. But what you guys are doing over at Area 15 is you're creating an experience first, and like every great experience, it exits through the gift shop. So you're literally introducing them as IP, and then when they come around, if they participate in the art part or not, that's entirely up to them. So it's a very, once again, with SUPERPLASTIC, it's taking the old model and completely spinning it around. Do you guys have any sort of idea of what's your projection on, like, how many people will consume as a consumer and how many people will just experience as somebody who's just looking for, you know, a fun afternoon?
Yeah, we are so excited to see where this nets out. I mean, to me, you know, the old school idea of there being a funnel and you sort of come through the top and become a loyalist at the bottom, there are so many ways into this world. That's the beauty of this world that we all get to live in here, whether you are first attracted by the merch or the toy or the experience or maybe the content. We don't care. We love you however you come in, and we want to, I see our team's job as creating the pathways to explore.
Yeah.
And that physically manifests over at Area 15 at Dopamine because, first of all, in Area 15, we're the only experience that you can walk into retail without a ticket. And that was a very intentional choice because we think people will step into the world, find it really interesting, and be like, well, tell me more, right? Like, we want to inspire that curiosity.
So it's enter through the gift shop, exit through the gift shop strategy.
Yeah, it's always through the gift shop.
Yeah, but I mean, that's interesting though, because people might just be at Area 15. They probably came for the anchor tenant, which is Meow Wolf, which is an amazing experience. They're still like, what else can we do here? We don't fly out till 5:30. They pop in the shop. They understand you guys have this experience. And then it'd be interesting to know once they go through the experience, because when I owned a toy store, the number one thing that people would say when they came in was, what the fuck is all this shit?
Yeah.
And we'd be like, well, it's art and blah, 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 blah. And it went right over them. But if they go through the experience and they get the personality, and you know, what's interesting is with the experience you guys have created, there's these several little installations that you go through, and each one of those creates like a memory. Yeah. And now you have spent time with these characters. You feel like you know their personalities. There's a couple of cool spoilers that I won't give, but you kind of create a bond and they're working against you and then you work with them. And so there's a 3-act story, and it'll just be interesting to see how does instant consumption of IP, can it translate into an instant fan of that IP? Like, I want to interview you in like 100 days and see what's going. Yeah,
definitely. And, you know, I think the other thing is it's going to inform the future toys that we create as well.
Sure.
Because, you know, today we have very few toys that I would say are lifelike recreations of our characters. And, you know, our toys do follow a more typical collector art toy model, which of course we'll keep and continue to develop. But I do wonder, like, are we going to now have a new audience for character-like toys, and product?
And you know, talking about listening to your customer, with what DKE does now, Dove, and all of the like satirical sort of play on pop culture, when you do events like this all weekend long, and it's not just a JPEG on a website, where you have no idea what somebody's saying when they see it on social media or fall into the website, when you're standing there and you're hearing the feedback real time, does that help you kind of figure out where the next line of jokes or next line of products go, or like too heavy on Star Wars, or do you hear people ask for like, hey, do you have anything for Ghostbusters? Like, how much does the audience help you curate the future experience?
Unfortunately, not a lot.
Okay.
Because what we're selling primarily are small, exclusive, handmade runs that artists have made for us to sell at conventions. So we're sort of a launching off platform, especially for a lot of artists that are starting out. The artists, like if you look at like Sucklord or Healy Made, they do that full time.
Yeah.
They don't really have to make an exclusive for me in order to sell here at the show. I think what we're doing sort of reflects trends. You can just see that it's quite often Star Wars heavy because the work works on a lot of different levels. There are just straight up action figure collectors that were sort of like fooling into buying art, right? It's sort of the same thing as the dunny, you know, and they buy the thing and then they realize, oh, an artist made this. This is not something that was, you know, mass produced in China. This is someone who used their hands to create this. So I don't have much control over that. The few things that we actually make in-house are when we are taking an artist that is already in the art world but doesn't make an action figure. So let's say like Frank Kozik, Ron English, Scott C., I could name a dozen other artists who would never make a 3 3/4 inch action figure. That's not their medium.
Yeah.
So we can help make, an MC supersize for Ron English in a 3 3/4 inch form.
Right.
It's still hand poured and hand painted. Ron's not painting it, obviously, right? So, and that's to draw a different crowd, right? Those are for the art toy collectors. And maybe someone wants, a Ronald McDonald heavy set clown next to their Darth Vader. I don't know.
That's up to them. But, as Jennifer is talking about, is Superplastic retail, experiential, or an art gallery? The same could be said for what you're doing right now, because is that a mobile art gallery? Is that a artist distribution system? Or is it a store? There's so many different ways where you can look at the fact that, once again, you're a conduit of creativity. And you're bringing all these people together that don't have the bandwidth to come to Las Vegas to do all this stuff. And how many artists do you think you're representing in the booth this weekend off the top of your head?
Several hundred.
Wow.
There's probably 25 that made stuff specifically to premiere here at this show.
Yeah.
We have whatever's left over from the last show, and then plus backstock and other stuff. But we're definitely setting up an art installation at every show. It is a little mini art gallery devoted to this medium of these artists whose chosen medium is action figure. It's weird. Because I have to. Part of this is explaining to people what it is, because people come up, they're like, what is this? Yeah. And they don't understand, like, this is handmade. They're like, how do, they're just sort of befuddled. And we're like, this is art. This is a group of artists whose medium is action figure. And then it starts, you explain they're hand cast, hand painted. And that's how these artists can borrow from pop culture and sort of get away with it. So it's not, we're careful. We don't have anything trademarked. Don't use any logos. Careful of wording. A lot of artists bring something to me, and I'm like,
too on the nose.
I can't sell that. Yeah. It has to have what they call transformative properties. Yeah. And at this level, at the handmade level, it's appropriate, and no one doesn't seem to ruffle any feathers. But if you take it to the next step, then if it's in Target or Walmart, someone's going to have a problem.
Your booth is also interesting in a whole other way that we could talk about this endlessly, is that, when we look at folklore or fairy tales, just stories that are just passed along, and then at some point someone's like, I want to write this down and turn it into a book, right? And then that becomes sort of the established story that we all agree upon, that is Snow White or Cinderella or whatever it is. But because we now live in a world of so much IP, And we all have our intimate experiences of seeing E.T. for the first time or seeing Star Wars. We all have these entry points. And what your booth is doing is reinterpreting that story and telling it in different ways and playing with the DNA of pop culture. And so it's kind of what I'll just say mankind to keep it easy because I'm not smart enough to figure out how to make that gender neutral. But what mankind's been doing since the beginning is like sort of telling each other the same stories over and over again. And what's happening in that booth is art, like reinterpreting the world all around it. So when people walk up and go, what is this? Mm-hmm. That is not an easy thing to break down in an elevator pitch, right?
It's very difficult.
Yeah.
And some people walk up and get it, and some people after an explanation just walk away like, I don't get it. And that's fine.
Yeah. And that makes it interesting what you guys are going to do at Area 15, because Las Vegas is just like a portal, right? It's a portal for the world. And you get people that come from all walks of life, all budgets, all interest levels, all political and social backgrounds. And so you're going to just create this space where they can walk in and they, like Meow Wolf across the hall, they can consume it at whatever level that they want. So not only do you offer different price points and different experiences, but you also offer the level for people to kind of look at it as a shop and walk out, or to dig deeper. And I think as an adult, it's fun to find mystery and quest to solve. And you guys definitely did a good job of putting an air of mystery to it. So let's talk a little bit about how you tried to make the retail space kind of a gateway or an interest or a curiosity gap for what lies behind the wall.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to tag into one thing that you guys were just talking about too before I answer that, which is, I also come at it from the realm of fandom, because I spent most of my career in sports prior to coming to SUPERPLASTIC, and the fandom around teams and leagues and things, it's tribal, right? And it's something that you share multi-generationally, just like Star Wars or the great IPs that we're talking about here today. And I think there's something really special about that then we're hoping to translate into a physical time together, because our audience is still largely Gen Z and young millennials who want to spend more on experiences together than on stuff. We want to sell them both.
Yeah.
Right? And so when we thought about crafting that experience, that played very much into how we designed that space. And the idea that we wanted to be accessible and bring people in, but also make them work a little for it, right? So if you stand outside right when you walk into Area 15, we're the first sort of storefront on the right. And what's incredible about it is they let us put these epoxy tire treads right almost from the front door into our space, because the first thing you really see is a very traditional recreation of an accident. So our main character, Googymon, has run a truck into our other main character, Janky, who's standing at a hot dog stand. And you see it physically. There's no tech. It's classic, build.
It's a set piece.
Show set.
Yeah.
But then hopefully that's intriguing enough to come in, and now you start to see all the graffiti on the walls. That was all done with very prominent local Vegas artists, traditional graffiti style homage to other artists and things like that. And so if you know, but if you don't know, you start to wonder, well, where am I exactly? And as you dig deeper, yes, you see our products and our stuff like that, but then you also start to see this looks like a dumpster, and it's a desk, and you can buy a ticket. And so that's kind of how we wanted to really unfold the experience, that what you come to find out is that you're in a scam. Janky and Googymon have set up their latest great scam, and suddenly you're made to feel like you're in a back alley in Queens.
Well, I love that when I went to meet you, your assistant goes, just walk through the front door and follow the tire tracks.
Yeah.
She'll be there waiting for you. But so let's break this down from another direction though. Out front, you have the social media moment. You have the more than life-size characters, so you can go up front and you can take a photo. If your store's closed or open, that photo is available for anybody to take. The FOMO feeds everything right now. I went to Vegas. What did I show everybody back at home that I did? So you've got that anchor point there. Then when you go into the set piece, it's another Instagram moment. The graffiti, the toys, there's so many different moments for people to capture. Bitch, I'm here, I'm doing it. So you have all of that there. But what's great is once they go past that door, you don't mess with your phone. like the entire group I was with, we're all people that are high-level professionals, have to be on our phones at all time. We were adults, 2 groups, a group of 3, a group of 2. We mixed together. We had a great time. We're working as a team. We're laughing. We're having fun. We're meeting each other. All exchanged numbers afterwards and became buds. Like, but we were just living in the moment. Yeah. And I really love that it seems like social media is leading people into moments, and then some of these people that are smart at it actually create real world moments where people put the phone down. And so what I enjoyed about it is I got to hang out with people old school. Yes, we're doing technical things so that our dumb brains feel like they're getting that stimuli. But for a moment, we were just like living together, working as, you know, as a team and as friends, new friends and old friends. So I love that it's social media that kind of like the interest of like, I want to go in there and take some photos of myself. But then once they go past the wall, they're just living an experience with their friends. So I think that's super, super important. I hope I'm explaining that right.
No, you're explaining it perfectly well. And I'm so glad that that happened that way, right, for all of us. And the other thing is there is sort of a trick to it too, because when you buy a ticket, you also get an RFID wristband. And that RFID wristband is something you check into every room with, and you don't really know why. You start to feel like it's part of the story eventually, but in the last room, when you're through the experience, you tap your wristband one more time, and now all of a sudden you get all the photos of yourself in those rooms. So Mark, to your point, like you don't have to have your phone with you. I don't know that we connect that quite yet, but the fun part is you'll have those memories too, to take home with you for free.
I think it's important that you don't tell people that you're capturing.
Yeah.
Because there's moments in there where you're like, oh shit, I'm glad there is a photo of this, you know? But I don't know, I mean, it was fun to do that. And so, Dove, when we look at, you know, where this all began as people that were interpreting IP into making toys, now so many people in this room are looking to launch IP. They're looking to get to better, you know, to a bigger place with their career. And we've seen so much of that happen. Do you think that that has maybe brought in a new wave of people that don't see this as like a community or a scene or a stepping stone to something bigger and brighter in their eyes?
I mean, I think this is definitely a jumping off point for culture in general. There's always people walking around these shows looking for the next thing. Unfortunately, it's mostly like Hollywood people looking for like, can I turn this into, you know, a cartoon, or can I find this creator to work with to do that kind of stuff. But we're talking about for something to be successful, right? We're talking about these big, you know, Disney and Star Wars. Those are, you know, once in a generation kind of, you know, flagships that everyone is looking for, and that's what I think is in the back of every artist's mind.
Right.
That one day I'll get Hollywood money.
Yeah.
When artists call me, that's kind of not, obviously, you know, put your best foot forward. You know, maybe magic will happen, great.
Right.
But I'm more concerned about artists being true to themselves, creating because they have to create, and being happy with their creation, and going down the road of making what they are compelled to create rather than what they think other people will consume.
Right.
Because more than likely, the other stuff that is popular is always just a regurgitation of what someone else did before, when someone else with a bunch of money comes to invest in that. And usually working with that original artist is too difficult, because they have, you know, ideas that are not conducive to business. So you see a lot of, you know, when Hollywood comes in, it's almost easier to take the sort of the genesis of this, but change it enough and go start their, you know, big ad campaign based on that. But artists are difficult to work with. I mean, that's what I do for a living.
Yeah.
This is what I've always done. And I've always been good at dealing with difficult personalities.
Yeah.
And I think that's the only way that I can do what I do, right? It's because everyone, we won't go into it, but you can just imagine.
Yeah.
And it sort of just depends where you are in your career. And then the more and the level of insecurity and the narcissism and, you know, all that's wrapped up in that. And then, you know, that's just part of the game. But that's all worth it, you know, to get to the creativity.
Right. And so, Jennifer, as we're looking at artists that use toys as a best foot forward to get noticed, you know, maybe my illustration work or my paintings aren't capturing the spirit of what I'm trying to do, but maybe if I make it an inanimate object and somebody can see it and touch it, maybe that's the thing that gets me my career in Hollywood, whatever I'm pursuing. SUPERPLASTIC's on a very different pursuit. You guys are doing that exact same thing that all these small booths are doing, you know, one man, one woman operations are doing, but you're doing that with technology. And instead of like, oh, I'm gonna make the toy, it's like, well, there's these new things that are coming. Somebody's got to be the first person to kick the tires on it, see how it goes. Like, we're having a conversation about the Apple Vision Pro. Yeah. And a lot of my friends are like, that's a piece of shit, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, yeah, it is today. You're not wrong. But we're limited by our imaginations of where that technology is going to go. So at some point, these companies just have to start making this stuff and then let the private developers come in and figure out what that application, what that use is. So let's talk a little bit about, like, I mean, your business model is like wild right now. Like, you guys are just swinging at all these different things, obviously hoping something sticks. Yeah, but when you guys, you know, take a leap into doing like the AI live streamers, I mean, just think about that for a moment. A AI character is live streaming and can live stream with you and connect with you. And I checked out the beta that you sent me. It's wild. Like, when you guys are working on all that stuff, how are you trying to process like which technologies are good to jump in? Like, just give me a little bit of behind the scenes on like how you go, okay, there's this thing, but what's our application for it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, in that sense, we're all the same, whether it's, you know, the single creator or companies far bigger than us. It is expensive to create new IP, and it is a little bit of a hit and hope game where you don't really know the audience feedback until you make that art and you put it out, or you make that character, if you're Hollywood, and you put it in a TV show. And, you know, all of those things cost time and money. And we need to be as scrappy as anybody else in trying to figure out who are the next characters. And so my approach at SUPERPLASTIC has really been to use technology for the good for us. So we've come up with a process that mixes human creators with tools, AI tools, that help accelerate their creativity. And that is absolutely the focus. So for example, what it's yielding for us, we have human beings that are designing and creating the characters, illustrating them, etc. We have writers that we've hired. I've hired more creatives in the past year than ever as we've adopted tech. We have writers that are interacting with AI models to create new characters very quickly. And so the idea being that if I was a writer, you know, 10 years ago and I created a character, I said they liked chemistry and McDonald's, right? And Fortnite. And I put it in a book somewhere. Today, my character can be trained on, you know, segments of chemistry, all the lore of Fortnite and what their favorite meal is at McDonald's. And that can be immediately available and reusable, not just for my own character development, but also to now test with audiences. And that's the fun part too, because what we're able to do with our audience is put a segment of audience that maybe likes video gaming and connect them with one of our new characters and get real-time feedback. Yeah. Do you like this character? Is it stupid? You know, yeah. What could they do that's cooler? And that helps us really accelerate how fast we can get new characters that we think people might like.
And can the character be receptive to the audience feedback so that in real time it's adapting to what people are interested in?
Not quite yet.
Okay.
But in that, you still have to take all of that training and update the model.
Got it.
But that will come. What is cool though is they're pretty agile in what you ask them.
Yeah.
Right.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Dove, this has been going on for 2 decades now. And way back when all this started, people were like, what is it? It's an art, it's a toy. And I heard so many people, it'll never last. I remember in 2008 when the economy got wild, like, oh, this is it. It's the end of toys. But it's persevered. And if you look around, this is the biggest DCon I've ever seen with so many different booths of people that are hand sculpting or now finding their own factory and independently producing. What do you think has been so important that this trend has gone beyond trend and become a community and a lifestyle, and something that seems like it's going to be here for another 2 decades? Like, what do you think has made it persevere?
I guess I'll just quote Frank Kozik again. He told me that every art form has had its pop culture renaissance, and you can just point to whatever, film, poetry, you name it, like throughout history, the past few thousand years. And the time for this kind of DIY 3D design is now. So it seems like 20 years, it's a short period of time, but that's just a blip, right? And he's also said that it will have a crazy up and down, but that it's going to settle, it's going to plateau, and it's going to be there forever. And this isn't going anywhere.
No.
I mean, what? This is going to disappear? Look at this. This is insane.
Yeah.
And next year it's just going to be more, and this is going to be its permanent home, and it's just going to keep growing. And the technology has gotten to the point. I mean, this started because an artist was generally not able to go make something in China without making 10,000 of something. And then the politics shifted a little bit, the early 2000s, and then someone for a modest amount of money, 10, 20,000, could go make 500 toys, could make 1,000 toys. That's sort of where we came in. But now it's even smaller. The artists that we're working with make 20, 10, 50. People have digital printing. They can learn a tutorial online how to cast resin. People in here are sewing. Like, it just, slip casting plaster. They can do, and they're finding ways to express themselves in a three-dimensional art form in a way that was just not possible decades before without a lot of money, and even a lot of know-how.
Yeah.
So
I want to just thank you for keep bringing up Frank in today's conversation. I interviewed him on the stages at DCon. He was in panels with me for years. Me and Jermaine did his, memorial last year. So it's just like you're making me feel like he's here. So thank you for doing that. I appreciate that. Jennifer, in the same way, where Dove just beautifully described like how this is going to just keep going and it's now a permanence in our society. What do you think are the important things about how this grows and scales in the next 2 decades? Like, what are your trend forecasting on tech to keep, like Dove said earlier, like when Frank polled those people, it was like the Dunny brought them in. And I really feel like you guys are kind of scratching the surface on some new satellites, some new entry points to bring people into this culture.
No, absolutely. I think, and that's the fun of where this is going. We're also living with generations that are coming of age, that are more creative, want to create, want to be part of the IP more than any of us ever were at their same age. And the tools are fantastically more cost effective today. I hope to see hundreds that are creating, and frankly, creating with us. Like, I don't think SUPERPLASTIC is necessarily the one that's going to have the next, massive IP or massive this or that. It should be something that actually gets, in some ways, co-created with the fans.
Yeah.
And, the business models will evolve and they will figure that out. And that's kind of the fun of it. But, to the point, how do you get hooked? What's that first heroin, to the vein? Hopefully it can be all of us that, that have already started and build audiences in this space.
Well, when the company was formed and I saw what Paul and Huck were doing with the early idea, and then as they start coming up with crazier and crazier ideas, I'm like, I like where this is going. And I was excited to see Paul return to this world because, like I said, I didn't like that the Kid Robot story didn't conclude with him at the helm. And I would like to see what he's capable of because I think the guy's a true visionary and SUPERPLASTIC seems like it's on that path. Dove, always love talking to you, man. It's so cool to talk to somebody who's been here from the beginning and keeps doing what he's doing. And I've always admired that it seems that you do it from a real purist. I mean, I know you got to pay bills and you're an adult, but I love your amount of curation and attention to detail and what you are for the scene. And Jennifer, thank you so much for sharing with us today and also trying to figure out how some of this shit that doesn't make sense to us can quickly make sense to us and create all these new experiences. Friends, let's make some noise for both Jennifer from SUPERPLASTIC
Thank you.
and Dove Kilmer of DKE. DKE's booth's right over there. So thanks for sitting at the bus stop. I appreciate y'all. See you in a bit. Thank you.